Welcome everyone to the third Thursday meetup of the West Orlando WordPress Meetup Group. I'm Rob Watson, a co-organizer and host. West Orlando WordPress is an official WordPress meetup group and is affiliated with the main WordPress Orlando and WordCamp US meetup groups. Choosing a host is one of the most important decisions you could make for your site and your business. Not all hosts are the same. Don't lose money with the wrong host. This talk will cover what to look for in a WordPress host and how to ensure the host you choose will be a true partner in helping your site grow. Tonight's presenter is Chris Wiegman. Chris is a senior software engineer at WP Engine and has been working with WordPress for over a decade. During that time, he built one of the largest WordPress security plugins, as well as various plugins and themes for clients of all sizes, Google Chrome extensions, and even WordPress development environments. A teacher at heart, Chris has spoken at numerous WordCamps and other conferences, as well as taught both computer science and aviation for universities throughout the US. At this point, I'd like to invite everyone to mute their microphones for the presentation. Chris, thank you for being our presenter this evening. The time is now yours.
Thanks for having me. These slides are online if you'd like to follow along. It's cfw.li. That's WOWP0721. I realized in presentation here, I'm realizing that font doesn't translate well. So it's West Orlando WP0721 if you're interested in the slides. We'll go ahead and get started. Like Rob said, I'm a senior software engineer at WP Engine, so I've got a little bit of experience with WordPress hosting. Previously in the WordPress space, I'm mostly known for having originally built iThemes Security, which I built it as better WP Security before selling it to iThemes in 2013. I've worked for St. Edward's University, Southern Illinois University, University of Florida, 10up, and a couple other WordPress companies along the way, doing everything, mostly enterprise level sites, and currently a lot of developer experience type work. After security, I started focusing heavily on privacy. I've spoken on privacy in countries such as the Netherlands, US, Canada, and the UK. And I'm also originally a pilot at heart. What got me into all of this stuff is when the last recession hit. My first day as a professional pilot was 9/11. So when the recession hit, flight school called up and said, "Hey, you helped fix computers as a student worker. Do you want to do this full time? We'll let you get a different degree." So I kind of ran with that and started building their websites. So that's how I came into this stuff. But that's not really what we're talking about today. Today I want to talk a little bit about choosing the right host. And one thing that comes up a lot when I do these, especially in Q&A, is posting horror stories. For me, probably the worst of these was I had taken a train from Chicago to Boston about a few years back, just to say we had taken Amtrak long distance because it was something neat to do. And it was about 2 o'clock in the morning when I saw notifications from folks on my site that my site wasn't working. Well, it turned out my host at the time had just simply shut it off. They said I was getting too much traffic. Never a notice, never anything else. They just simply shut the site off. And I've seen a lot of similar stories over the years. The host upgraded something without telling you, downgraded something, added a feature, doubled prices. I mean, we all have these horror stories as to what can go wrong with hosts, especially some of the smaller hosts, the fly-by-night type companies and things like that. Anyway, back to hosting horror stories. I think we all have some. If you're working with clients, these horror stories are usually something like, somebody didn't update their billing, so your client's site is completely offline, and now it's up to you to explain. We've seen quite a bit, and we've also seen quite a bit of success stories too. The host that your WooCommerce client in the beginning of November notices that your host, your client is starting to, their product's getting bigger. So they proactively call you and say, "Hey, we need to do something with your client to prepare them for Cyber Monday or Black Friday." We've seen stories of hosts that have gone above and beyond with, "Hey, there's something wrong with the security of your site." Before your customers notice it, they tell you that something's gone wrong. Maybe it's been hacked or whatever it might be. You have a bad plugin, a bad theme. This stuff happens. And a good host is the ones that are proactively taking care of this for you. I'm trying to think of some of the better hosting experiences I have, but quite honestly, most of my personal sites over the years have been self-hosted. Things like DigitalOcean and stuff where I rent the server space. Well, it works a little bit different in those types of businesses, or at the universities where they have their own servers. But I've seen plenty of instances of hosts and customers coming back to us and saying, "Hey, Yeah, they, oh, this new feature is really great. We didn't know we were getting it, or, just the types of things. Education's a big part of it for hosting success stories. Most churn, which is churn in hosting business, is a loss of a customer. Most churn is going to happen within the first 90 days. A success story is the hosts that are going to help you onboard that client. They're going to teach you, this is how you use our control panel. These are the things that can go wrong. If you're migrating a site, it could be something as simple as, hey, you're using this related post plugin. This is why you had problems in the past. Let's see if we can switch you to something better, or some sort of infrastructure that can better handle those types of hits that such a plugin can bring. So there's as many horror stories as there are, which is what we normally hear about. There's also quite a few success stories, and those are the types of things we're looking for as we choose these. In the end, though, it's still the best host for you is the host you don't have to think about. Most of us in this call, that's probably the best host for us, is the host our clients don't have to think about. The ones that we know are, whether it's your salesman that you talk to or your account rep, you have somebody that you can talk to. They're a partner to you to make sure that your clients' sites are staying up and staying running. Of course, there's other things that make a good host. There's affordable price. If your client's just starting out with a personal blog and they don't understand what's going on, so they've come to you for a basic maintenance plan, if you go to them with $500 a month for hosting versus a site that's getting a few bits a month, probably not going to get you too far. But good hosts will still have plans to grow or shrink. So if that 500 hits a month becomes suddenly 50 million hits a month, a good host is going to be able to accommodate that for you, and proactively. So they're growing your site before the site goes down rather than after. And sometimes they shrink them back down too. I see all the time tickets come through with clients that I talk to at WordCamps that, yeah, we had this huge plan, but we weren't using it anymore. So the account rep called us up and shrink it back down. I haven't seen that just with WP Engine. I saw that a lot in my 10-up days too, when we were working with sites all over the place. Secure, are they watching their security? Well-maintained servers, which often goes hand in hand with security, but also goes hand in hand with performance. If a server is not well-maintained, it's really easy to watch the performance degrade very quickly. Accessible support. I mean, we all deal with this on a regular basis. Can you even get to support? Is there a phone number? Is it just chat? Do they speak your language? This call, everybody's probably speaking English as a primary language, or maybe Spanish. Do they have, if your first language is Spanish, your client's language is Spanish, do they have Spanish-speaking support? I deal a lot with folks in the European Union and India. Can they even get support in anything other than English? We look for the ones that have US-based support, but that's not always what a client's going to be looking for. And of course, reliable uptime. Most have a service level agreement or a guaranteed uptime of 99 point whatever percent. Nothing's going to be up 100%. What's their history? Do they have a status page that's saying that you can look back over the last 30, 60, 90 days, whatever, and say, oh, they had 2 instances in 90 days that affected X number of clients. Those are good. That's good information to have, to know if the things are going to go well and if it's going to work for you. But that's a good host. And then there's a great host. Just because you can communicate with support doesn't mean that they necessarily know what's going on. If support is only ever telling you to disable all your plugins and reading from a script, that's not really helping you when you call them up and say, hey, we're getting really heavy hits on this page that doesn't exist. It looks like it's a bot attack, and they're blaming your plugin that doesn't exist. That's not all that knowledgeable. Do they have knowledge of WordPress is simply something that you're going to want to look for. You'll see that a lot with page leads, WP engines, the managed WordPress hosting. Big part of that managed support or managed feature is the support base. Are they making backups for you? I wanted to put an asterisk next to this when I made these slides. Never trust your host backups as the only backups. You want to have an off-site backup as well. But if nothing else comes down to it, and they're not paying, your client's not paying you for a maintenance contract or whatever, at least hook them up with hosting that will hopefully give them something when they inevitably screw it up because they didn't pay for that maintenance contract later and somehow knock their site down. Make sure there's a backup that can hopefully restore. Are they handling WordPress updates for you? And this may sound redundant in an era where WordPress can automatically update for you. But what do those updates test? If WordPress doesn't update to WooCommerce, say from 4.9 to 5.5, chances are something's going to break in a major update like that, or even a minor update some kind. Does the host have software and testing to make sure that, they look at the site beforehand, run the update, and then look at the site again to make sure nothing's broken? Regression testing is what they call it. A good number of the managed hosts have regression testing built into their updates. And I know a lot of y'all are probably doing maintenance work with your subscriptions with your clients, but this is just one other tool that if they have regression testing, it just makes your life a lot easier, because it's real easy. If you do this 10 years and you have 15 clients, some point in 10 years, you're going to miss something. The about page deep in there somewhere, which is an important page, maybe you missed checking that, or maybe just little things that can go wrong, or caching didn't show the problem. These types of security updates or WordPress updates with regression testing can just make that a little bit easier for you. Are they managing security? WooCommerce is a big example of this in the last 24 hours. Last night, a lot of folks got emails that WooCommerce had vulnerability that it hasn't been released what the vulnerability is yet, but it's major enough that if you use WooCommerce and they can see it, they will update it even if you have automatic updates turned off. That's a pretty big deal in WordPress with any plugin, but to do that with WooCommerce is a really big deal. What happens with your host? Or not with your host, but will that break something on the site? Maybe you have custom code. You probably shouldn't have custom code in WooCommerce, but it happens. What's going to happen there? And the flip side of that, does your host have your back? Are they looking for those security updates? Are they applying the updates to the server software? PHP regularly releases security updates. MySQL has regular updates. The operating systems themselves, I don't care if you're on Mac or Linux or Windows or what you're on, you have regular security updates. So does your host. Are they applying those updates? So making sure that security is up to date with those types of things make for a great host. A community commitment. Some of the best hosts we see actually participate in WordPress. They're not just saying, hey, you can put WordPress on our software. They're part of the WordPress community. WP Engine, GoDaddy, the list goes on and on of hosts that actually participate and give back. Most of the bigger hosts have somebody on staff whose sole job it is to give back to the WordPress project. That can become a big deal. That means they know what's going on with the community. They know how to handle things that are going forward. Do you have a dedicated account rep? If you have one or two sites for 30 bucks, you don't have a dedicated account rep. I get that. But if you're trying to run a bunch of clients, 50, 60 clients, do you have somebody you can call directly when something goes wrong? Not the level 1 support person who doesn't know you from the last person who called, but somebody you can call and say, hey, I've been here 6 years. This broke. What are you doing to fix it? And can give you some information about it. And then just ethical company and ethical leadership. This is becoming a bigger deal as people are shopping for hosts and tech work in general. Whether your issue is free speech, whether your issue is the support of other organizations, does the company you work with match your ethical values? I have lost clients for using certain hosts where that didn't stand up. Yes, I saw somebody's note about sustainable practices. If you go to websitecarbon.com, which is it's a rudimentary way of measuring the carbon impact to your site. But one of the notifications it tells you is whether or not your site, they can see if you're a host that does renewable energy or tries to use renewable energy. Don't know how accurate it is, but that can be one thing that you're looking for. The one that I did was a host that had an owner that was known for big game hunting. And the client that I was about to sign with was a conservation organization in Southern Illinois. Needless to say, when I bought the domain from that host, I lost that client pretty quickly. So these are the types of things that you have to look out for, whether you, regardless of where your politics might lie on any side of any kind of equation. Does the company that you're working with meet your goals and meet those of the clients that you're trying to do business with? And there's some warning signs when you go through all this stuff as well. Outdated homepage, handshake promises. We've all heard this. You talk to the salesman at a WordCamp or a meetup. Yeah, we offer this. And then you sign up and realize, wait, they don't actually offer it, or it was some beta feature that they're discontinuing or whatever it might be. Outdated tech stack, PHP, MySQL. This one's a little weird this year. PHP went to PHP 8 this year, or well, last fall, and a lot of hosts still don't offer it. And there's technical reasons for that. A big part of what PHP 8 offers for users doesn't work on shared hosting in the same way it works on dedicated hosting. So a lot of hosts have not been quick to roll out PHP 8 for that type of reason. So saying that they have 7.4 and not 8 might not be outdated, because there could be a real reason for it currently. But if your host only offers PHP 5.6, or for that matter, if your host still offers PHP 5.6, that might be a warning sign that they're not keeping up with things as they should. Limited support options. Some smaller hosts I've seen limit support hours to 9 to 5 in whatever their time zone might be. They might limit it to phone only or online only or email only. Do those work for you? Maybe they do. Great. If not, that could cause you a lot of problems going forward. If your client's in a different time zone than the host, and so it goes down in the middle of their workday, can you get it back up? So watch those hosting support options, especially on the smaller hosts. And then the biggest one with what we're doing is just listen to what folks are saying. Warnings at WordCamps, meetups, the networking that we're all doing with WordPress. Word gets around. It's a small world. Yes, WordPress is 42% of the internet, yada, yada, yada. It's still a small world. If a host screws somebody over, you're going to hear about it. Take those stories to heart, because there's an awful lot of whitewashing of reputations of a number of hosts. Probably every host, quite honestly, to some extent, has had their reputation whitewashed for one reason or another. Listen to what they're doing. If you're hearing a lot of people complain about a host because it doesn't work with X plugin, it doesn't work with the learning management system plugin that you specialize in, that might be a very good reason to flip to somebody else. So listen to that word of mouth. I mean, yes, everybody's going to have a bad experience. There isn't a host out there where you're not going to find somebody to go, oh yeah, this host is horrible because this one thing happened this one day. Everybody has a bad day. Listen to what folks are saying over the long haul. If it's a repeated, oh yeah, this host went down, this host went down, this host went down, repeated over and over, that trend is probably something you want to watch out for. And those conversations happen a lot at WordCamps. These days, I tend to hear even more about them because I've been with WP Engine for almost 3 years now. And it's amazing how the conversation changed when I started working for a host. Oh, I use so-and-so, and I'm having this problem or that problem. And you start hearing even more trends. So the conversations do happen. Sometimes you have to ask, but they're out there. Some hosting metrics we can talk about when we're looking for things. The first one, and I keep harping on this, is support. Probably the single biggest different, PHP 8 is PHP 8. Things can be tuned. Hosts can tune their hardware, their operating systems. Most hosts don't have their own data centers. They're probably hosting your site on Amazon, Google, Azure, some combination of the above, and they're configuring things on top of it. The text, what it comes down to is the tech stacks are fairly similar to some extent. And then the bigger differentiation becomes support. Do they support your hours? Do they support your languages? Spanish, the English-Spanish division I've seen in a US host with quite a few issues over time. You might speak English, you might speak some English to your client, but if your client's site's primarily in Spanish and something goes down when you're on vacation, they contact the host themselves. Can the host support them? Maybe it's not the person you normally deal with contacting them. I see this quite frequently. Can they support the language? Do they have training in the application? This is, as you're onboarding, are they helping you onboarding is what I mean by training. Do they just give you a control panel that you've never seen before and you just got to kind of go, what does this button do? Oh, that deleted the whole site, the reset button or whatever it might be. Or is there really good documentation, videos, other things available within the site to provide training so you understand what's going on and can use the tools that they provided you to manage your clients successfully? What methods do they offer for contact? I've talked about this before, but we'll bring it up again. Email, chat, phone, Do you have a if you have enough clients, if you have more than 15, 20 clients, you probably should have a dedicated phone number that you can reach at all times, not just going straight to level 1 tech support for every little issue. Do they have a published response time? Some of these hosts you can drop an email to or a call. There are plan levels and host levels out there that'll say, we guarantee a response to you in X minutes or an hour or something. Others might say 24 hours. If you're dealing with a lot of really small sites, 24 hours might be perfectly adequate, even if it goes down. But as soon as you're dealing with somebody's money-making business, trying to find a host that has a guaranteed response time within an hour, or that when you call them, you're going to get on the phone with somebody very quickly, becomes a big deal. That's one of those things that tend to come out a lot with WordCamp conversations. Yeah, I gave up with such and such because I could never get a hold of support. I hear that conversation quite a bit. Frankly, I've heard it with my company. I've heard it with most companies to one level. Watch what the trends are. Are they hiring more support? You hear this quite a bit at WordCamps. You hear it at meetups, especially meetups in the cities where some of these hosts live. Listen to what they're saying and how you can contact support and what's going on with the support involved. And of course, there's pricing. Everybody, make sure their monthly pricing is standard. You're not dealing with something that varies considerably. Are there any hidden fees? Some hosts, they're based on traffic. If you shoot over your traffic limit, can it cost you more? What constitutes traffic? So if you get a DOS attack, a denial of service attack, which is simply flooding a site with traffic until it crashes, do they count that as traffic that's going to work against and they're going to charge you more? That has happened with hosts before. For the type of work most folks in here are doing, what are their affiliate or their reseller plans? Can you make money off the hosting? It's nice to re-offer the hosting and suggest it to your client, but this is still your business. Can you make some money back, or is it worth your while? Maybe it's simply that the tools they're offering you are well enough that it's easier to bill your clients and things like that, so they're not necessarily monetary. But is the affiliate, the reseller plan, whatever they call it, is it successful enough, and is the pricing good enough that your return on investment meets expectations that you can then reoffer it to your client? You're not losing money, time, etc., beyond even what the client might be paying. So that's something to consider when you're dealing with hosting. There's a whole lot of different types of plans out there. Some hosts have really deep affiliate plans. We see those hosts all the time in their marketing. WordPress is famous for affiliate marketing. How many WordPress review sites, blogs, etc., are almost entirely based off of affiliates? That can be a little bit shady as far as recommendations, but you combine an affiliate program that works for you and makes your life actually easier, or makes you a little bit of money in a way that's not going to give you a headache, and combine it with their support offering, and you can usually do pretty well. Then, of course, like I say, tech stack I've listed last for a reason. It's important, but these days it's less important than it was 10 or 15 years ago. These companies typically aren't running their own data centers. Some do. Maybe that's something you even need to worry about if they do. Google, if your host is split across Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, Rackspace, Azure, 3 or 4 of these big tech stacks, and Google's entire data center goes down, okay, you've lost some clients. You haven't lost all of them. If the host has everything in one place and it goes down, A, you're probably not getting a hold of their support very easily because everybody and their brother is. But B, all the eggs are in one basket. There's no ability of them to have, especially on higher level plans. Some of these higher level plans, you might have your site co-located in multiple zones, typically they're called, multiple data centers. That can keep things from going down, or even across multiple different hosts. If they're using both Amazon and Google for a backend, they may offer ways that you can host your site on Amazon or Google. Or going back to what I said about the ethical company leadership, things like that, there are situations in which your host may not, or your client may not want to be hosted on Google, Amazon, whatever it might be. So does the host that you use and partner with offer alternatives? When they go and do an IP lookup, they know that they're not going to somebody they told you they didn't want to do business with. You see that more and more often in tech. Usually it's among big players. somebody who has maybe a competing product with one of them, but it does happen. And of course, make sure they're offering up-to-date PHP versions, up-to-date MySQL versions of MariaDB. Oftentimes these days it's MariaDB. MariaDB was a fork of MySQL. Oh, it's got to be 10 years now when Sun bought MySQL, because Sun Microsystems owns MySQL. The licensing got weird. Maria forked off of it for something that would continue to be open source. So you'll often see hosts offer MariaDB instead of MySQL. That's fine, just make sure they're current versions. Do they offer true caching, Varnish, Redis, etc., or are they just telling you to put a plugin on there? Do they offer a security firewall? Something like, do they partner maybe with Cloudflare, Security, SiteLock, something that they can integrate in their host so you're not configuring 7 plugins and playing all kinds of games. If your client site is under attack, your host has your back at that point. And then, like I say, backups. Do the backups work? Are they easy to access? Do you know how to get them? That shouldn't be your only backup on an important client, because let's face it, you really need to keep backups separate from your site. Backup plugins, WordPress, Backup Buddy exists for a reason. You might be able to you can have a local backup, but does the host at least have something that can hopefully protect you when things go wrong? And then finally, the hosting control panel. Is it usable? cPanel, for all the hate it gets, most people know it. It's fairly easy to use. There's arguments that it gets cluttered. It's really gotten cluttered over the years, but it's a familiar interface. There's lots, if you Google how to do X in cPanel, it's easy to find. A lot of hosts are moving to, or some of the bigger hosts, I should say, are moving to their own types of panels. We have our own portal, we call it. Is it usable? Is it easy to use? Can you clear the cache in it if they have caching? Do you know where to turn the firewall on? Do you know how to connect a domain to the site? All these little features in there, are they easy to use? Or every time you have to help a client out, are you going to spend 3 hours Googling how to do it? If that's the case, you probably need to move on to a different host, something that has something that's usable and is not costing you money in order to be able to do that. So one thing to keep in mind then, we've talked about what to look for, but then we want to talk a little bit about what is different about the hosts. And of course, not all hosts are equal. Watch the type of hosting. And this is something most of y'all are probably rather familiar with, but there's shared hosting, dedicated hosting, managed hosting, and then I listed hosting and provisioning. These are things like Cloudways, and there's a few others that you go out to a place and rent a raw server, and they come in and configure the server specifically for WordPress. I've seen a number of folks have a really successful time using these because they can often manage the costs of the servers they're using and scale them up and down very easily with DigitalOcean or another server provider, and then just make sure that the configurations are maintained by a third party. It's also a little bit of separation of resources, separation of duties there, where whoever is maintaining it, if you trust them, can sometimes do a better job than the hosts themselves of keeping things running for you. Managed hosting is, of course, everything for WordPress is done for you. You don't rent a server space, you rent a WordPress instance. They install the files, they usually keep it up to date. Their servers are configured in such a way that it might be a little bit better off with WordPress. Rewrite rules, whatever it might be, everything is managed for you. There's dedicated hosting, which is when you get your own server. In this case, these are big sites, things that need more than the $3 a month special plan that so many hosts offers. You have all the resources. Everything that's used on that computer is dedicated to your client's site. And then there's shared hosting, which is the classic and usually the cheaper plans. This is they stick as many sites on a server as possible. And each site is kind of like a tab in Chrome or Safari or whatever your browser is. For every one you open, it uses computer resources. And then by the time you've got 200 tabs open and your computer's slowing down, the same thing can happen with a shared site. If there's 200 sites on a host, on a single server, will that slow it down? Are they managing that in such a way that's going to cause problems? The bigger problem with shared hosting tends to be one site takes all the resources and then there's nothing left for anybody else, and things get really slow on some of the others. That's a classic shared hosting problem. But in either case, the reason people tend to move to dedicated is shared hosting with those shared resources simply isn't enough for a lot of traffic, especially in WordPress. So people tend to move to something bigger. Some other shared versus dedicated comparisons here, a little bit more official. Shared hosting's cheap, many sites, limited resources, and one bad site can bring it all down. We can second that one bad site can bring it all down, not just with resource usage, but if one site is hacked on a poorly configured host, that might mean all the sites on that server are hacked. So you might do all the updates for your user, for your client. Somebody else's site got hacked, and now all of a sudden your client site goes down too because it was able to spread through the server. That does happen with some configurations. Of course, dedicated is going to be more expensive, but like I say, one server has all the site. And you can do this with a virtual server or raw metal. You rent the entire box. Resources are basically unlimited. Instead of just one server, maybe you split the site amongst 15 servers if you have enough traffic or you have a big enough site. When I was at University of Florida, some of our sites ran on, I think it was 7 or 8 different rather high-end servers to serve all the traffic. Our intranet was WordPress based on BuddyPress. So 40,000 people a day all logged in. You can't do a lot of caching, so on and so forth. So we had everything split amongst a whole lot of different servers that would all run the same site. And then the nice thing about if you have a big site like this, and it should say make, and there's a typo, my apologies, but sites can make use of advanced tech. Apparently my E key broke when I wrote that line. So things like different types of caching. There's server resources called New Relic that can help you find problems that are really hard to install on shared hosting, but can be made use of very effectively on dedicated hosting. So as soon as you get to the point where it's your livelihood, it really makes a difference if this thing goes down, dedicated hosting can come in handy really quickly, if for no other reason than the tools in order to help make the site move forward and help to evolve the site as you keep working. Again, some points of managed hosting can be shared or dedicated. Host manages the application itself, replace plugins in your time without hosting features. But you're paying a little bit extra for this. And typically you're only running WordPress. So if your client comes in and says they want to run a Django site, they're not going to be able to do that. Or if they want to run Drupal next to WordPress, they're going to need to find a different host. But if everything's on WordPress, these can save you a lot of time and your clients a lot of headache, because typically these are the hosts that simply know what's going on more with the WordPress space. Some hosting feature or plugin, caching, security. The list goes on of things that we often advertise as features that there are big plugins for. And these big plugins do a good job. WordFence, I've had WordFence on many sites. Yes, I wrote better WP security, but I don't build that anymore. I tend to use WordPress for a number of reasons, including some of the folks are right down the street here in Sarasota. But those are features that oftentimes your host can take care of for you. Authentication, two-factor authentication. Can you log in? Those are things that your host may be able to handle for you. DDoS protection that these plugins offer. In the case of security, it's better to stop them before they get to your site than waiting for the application itself, which is what a plugin is, to stop them for you. The same goes with caching. There's a whole lot of really good caching plugins out there, and they are very effective if you don't have a server level solution. But it's still better that if your server offers something like Redis or Memcache, which are caching of the code in the back end, or offers something like Varnish, which is full page caching, kind of like most of the server plugins do, only it's built into the server itself and can be much more effective and much faster, just by virtue of the fact that you're not relying on the application to run it. Again, everything you take out of the application in WordPress is less resources your site's running, more people that can go to your site, usually faster things are, and your host can do this at scale at a much more effective rate than a single plugin can do. Caching plugins are a perfect example of this. If you get one hit a day, a caching plugin is probably not going to do much for you, because they typically somebody hits the site, it saves the page and has to remember it for a while. Where a properly configured host can hit the site regularly, you can have a bot do things and basically prime that cache. Or there's other ways you can prime the cache and make sure that things are ready for you when the users do show up. Like I say, it's not always that simple. Security on the server is better than security in the app. Security in the network is even better. I give an awful lot of security talks, and all this is saying is, once again, the earlier you stop an attack, the better it is. If you can stop it before it gets to the server, that's the best. That's what Cloudflare does. That's what your web application firewall does. Before it even gets to your host, it may stop the attack. If it gets to your host, it's better if it's stopped at the host level. A good host will have something called, for instance, fail to ban configured. Fail to ban is a little application that when you try to log into WordPress and you fail a couple times, it'll block that attacker at the server level. So it's not the application trying to load every time they try to log in. It's using server resources to keep it off the application, and it's much more effective than your plugin, which may do the same thing. So if you have Jetpack Brute Protect enabled, which does the same feature, every time somebody puts a bad login in, whether it's blocked them or not, it has to load a certain amount of resources of your site to determine if that user's blocked. Stopping them earlier is going to give you those resources back that you can then use them on somebody else. Not to mention, it's less chance of somebody being able to get through and cause trouble within your server. Say a well-configured host will beat a well-configured plugin. Plugins may conflict with host options. For years, and this is not true on WP Engine anymore, and I can't speak for other hosts, but we couldn't run WordFence on WP Engine. There were conflicting issues. That's been taken care of, but there are other times, how many times have you had a host tell you can't run X plugin? Related post plugins, not quite security, but they're a prime example of this. Can't run this, takes too many server resources. They're conflicting with something the host is doing. It might just be that they're too expensive in computing resources, but there's a problem where plugins may conflict with the host itself. Say web application firewalls, login security, security configuration at scale. When all a host does is WordPress, they know this stuff pretty well. They can take care of it for you and make sure everything's well configured for you. And again, watch your backup. Any backup is better than no backup, but make sure you know who owns the data. If a host account is shut down, if you're at 2 in the morning, your host shuts you down for too much traffic, you might not even be able to get to that backup. When did you last test it becomes a big thing here. Test your client. If they're paying you for maintenance contracts, test a backup at least once a year, just to make sure your backup method's working. Restore it to a staging site, restore it to a local site to test, but just make sure these backups are complete and functional. It's amazing how often when people still call me to retrieve a site or to fix a site that's been hacked, one of the biggest problems is they don't have a backup. Well, what happened to your backup plugin? Well, we had a plugin, but we can't get to the backup itself. Then you basically didn't have a backup at all. So watch what that backup is. When you integrate it all with the host, and it's the host that compromises, it can quickly become a problem if you're not careful. Automatic updates, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but I want to bring it up again. Everything does, WordPress itself does automatic updates now. This isn't a huge feature. But the big deal is, even if you have a maintenance contract, turn on that regression testing. We call it SPM at WP Engine. Other hosts call it different things. But literally all we're doing is we're taking snapshots of pages on the site, running the update, taking further snapshots. If they don't match, we can roll the plugin back very quickly with a backup. Those are the types of things where hosting backups come in real handy. And those are the types of things that can save you a lot of trouble if a security update comes out when you're on vacation. If you specialize, for instance, in WooCommerce, and this is your vacation week, you probably had a really bad you're probably having a really bad vacation with the security update from last night. This type of testing, this type of rollout of security updates can really save your butt and give you a lot of that time back very quickly. You can trust your host to know that those security updates are working well. Caching software. Make sure that whatever host you have makes it easy to clear your cache. That's a big deal. Some of these have these fancy caching technologies, but then when you update a site, they'll tell you, oh, wait 15 minutes. You can't do anything for 15 minutes, or you have to wait this long or that long. They should have some way to clear the cache as well. So make sure you have it. And just like we talked about earlier, make sure you know where it is. Can you find it in their hosting control panel. How do you configure cache? Is there anything to configure? So know what those caching features are and how to use them. A good host will offer Redis or Memcache. We actually use Memcache at WP Engine. They'll offer something like Varnish, and there's alternatives to that, but they'll offer these technologies that cache things in the server, which is much faster than loading PHP and then trying to find the cache page later. So many choices, which to pick. First of all, stick with what is your hosting budget? If your hosting budget is $15, WP Engine is not going to be the solution for you. Our cheapest shared plan is $35. If your hosting budget is $2,000 and this is your client's livelihood, now you have a whole list of things to open up. But you may not need to even, don't worry about if your budget is not enough to shop for a higher end site yet. Maybe it's a small site. Maybe it's somebody just getting started. Don't worry about trying to upsell them. Make sure instead that wherever you take them, it'll be easier to move them later if they need to move up. What is your maintenance budget for time and dollars? So it's not just how much money is your client paying you to maintain a site. If you have one problematic site that's eating up 20 hours a week or month, whatever, on your maintenance budget, that's going to add up really quickly if you're charging a fixed fee. So watch what your host can do to help reduce those fees. Good control panels where you can find things. Maybe it's clearing caches is easier. Maybe it's plugins you can reduce because their configuration is different and now you don't have to deal with some of their security or other plugins. There's a lot of things that can help make this maintenance a lot easier and reduce both, not just the dollars. If somebody else is paying the bill and it's a legitimate bill, it hopefully is an easy sale. You need X for this type of site and this size of site. But there's still those instances when a flat fee type maintenance thing can become a real nightmare just because of the nature of the site and things that are unforeseen. A good host will have your back on that. How many sites are you hosting? If you're hosting one site, this is pretty easy. Any host can do it. If you're hosting 100 sites, does your host have a way to make that easier for you? We have Growth Suite with Flywheel and WP Engine to help manage multiple sites. I know Liquid Web has a similar type of product. Kinsta has similar products, but what are the products to help you manage multiple sites? And do they work for you in your workflow? If you have to change your entire billing system to meet your host's needs, maybe that's a reason to move to somebody else because that's your business. That's going to slow you down and cost you money in the end. How big is your biggest site? Basing your host, if you want to stick with one host, you can never base that host decision off your smallest site. Those are easy. You have to base it off your biggest site. If your biggest site is only a few thousand hits a month for the type of sites you're maintaining, this isn't a big deal. But if you have a site that gets millions of hits a month or is expected to get millions of hits or simply has every quarter they have a big sale and traffic spikes, now you need to make sure you have a host that can handle that data burst. Standard steady traffic is easy. Bursts of traffic and growing traffic is where hosts tend to fall apart pretty quickly if you're not careful. So look at that biggest site and look at those sites' potential and make sure your host is capable of growing. If all they offer is a $5 plan and one size fits all, that could be a big problem later on if that site outgrows it. If they offer the $5 plan and they offer a $2,000 plan that you can grow into without a whole lot of trouble, you call them up and say, I need the bigger plan, and they flick a switch and it's done. Boom, that's an easy decision. But base that based on your biggest site or what you expect that biggest site to be, not what's on your smaller, or not even what's on your average site. What are their affiliate options? We talked about this a little bit before as well. Make sure the affiliate options work for you. That 20% a month, whatever, $20 a sign up, whatever it might be, might sound great. But if everything is horrible to work with, that's probably not going to help. If the affiliate options come with different types of tools, different types of support, reseller plans that work into your business, that might be far more valuable to you than simply the kickback you get in dollars. So watch that and don't just go for the dollars unless you know that host well. Be willing to look for a host that's affiliate and their reseller plans work for you, not just monetarily, but your time. Oftentimes with maintenance businesses and clients businesses, it's not the dollars. There's always more clients out there. It's that problematic client that eats up all your time that really can make things very difficult for you. So this is what you're trying to watch with there. And again, what is the WordPress community, not the host, suggesting? You can come, I'm trying to make this talk as little bit about WP Engine as possible because we may not fit your needs. There are a lot of hosts out there. Don't take our word for it. Listen to what other folks are doing and where they're sending their business. And that's probably a good sign as to something that's going to work for you as well. So thank you. You can find these slides again online, cfw.li. It's West Orlando WP 0721 for the slides. Or you can just go to slides.chriswiegman.com and the link is at the top of the page. So let's open it up to some questions here. I'm going to stop share.
Thank you so much for this informative presentation.